So, back by popular demand, we will be looking at the rest of the teams coming into Season 2 of the Overwatch League and some of my predictions that could be surrounding their rosters and what kind of roster moves that I would like to see them make. Coming in first, I think probably my most volatile roster, I think, coming into Season 2 within the second half, I think definitely has to be Los Angeles Gladiators. And I think overall, there's quite a few different avenues that they could pursue, but generically, I think they should take one player that is a free agent. And to kind of preface this, I have to add a little bit more context to exactly why this makes more sense than other teams. Now, if we look at the recent addition to their roster coming into the midseason, which was their flex tank that they've been playing quite a lot now, which is Void. He and Fissure both played on Kongdu Panthera way back in the Apex era, looking at Season 2, 3, I think it was actually 3, and 4. And they did incredibly well, and there is a free agent on the market that did play alongside them coming in from that same team of Kongdu Panthera, and that is going to be Rascal. I think that Los Angeles Gladiators should make a serious play for Rascal coming into the DPS role. This does kind of increase a lot of their DPS capabilities, and you probably have to shed someone. I'm probably looking at maybe Silk Thread, and I don't necessarily think that they'll be shedding Silk Thread. I think people are going to be actually pursuing him quite a bit, and I don't think that keeping Silk Thread for Rascal makes too much sense for me, especially because you have pre-established synergy coming in from the main tank and the flex tank roles. That being said, you do lose kind of a little bit of communication coming out of Silk Thread, which isn't something you definitely want to lose. But I think that Rascal is definitely one of the better free agent DPS players on the market right now, and I think they should definitely pick him up. Just a general kind of prediction. Now, the other two ways they could do this, when I say that, I do think that Rascal is going to be a very, baseline addition to the team. And these next two are kind of two hypotheticals that follow their own kind of branches in a tree, right? I think that because you add in another Korean player, you have to wonder, do you go full Korean at that point? Do you just kind of let all of your Western players become free agents and allow the other teams to pick them up, and then just go full Korean? In this kind of avenue, I would assume that I think you remove Asher. I think that he's been fairly okay at playing Tracer, but anything else, it's been kind of wishy-washy. I think he kind of fills the same niche that Striker has been, where like his other heroes are very kind of small and they're not really that great, and he kind of is becoming a more of a liability than he is anything else. Obviously, on Los Angeles, they don't have the kind of pinch that Boston is having, where Striker is kind of having to flex off to other roles, and it's kind of becoming an issue for them. So I would actually like Asher. Unfortunately, I think that he probably needs to grow a little bit more as a player in terms of just hero pool. He probably hits the bench or possibly contenders. And I think they probably make a move for effect. I think he's, fairly similar to the same heroes that Asher has played, but is just better on them. And obviously you still have this energy from when Rascal and Effect played on Dallas Fuel. So I think you would definitely, if you wanted to go a kind of a full Korean roster, I think that making that play would be really, really intelligent. The other kind of positions that you need to fill, looking at like another flex tank and then your supports, I would immediately look at the Shanghai Dragons and some of the other kind of bench Koreans that are coming out of like Philly or even Los Angeles Valiant, like Iazaki. I think bringing them over would really be intelligent, seeing how good the Korean additions have been from Shanghai, and then these other Koreans probably have been doing really well as on the kind of B teams for the other Overwatch League stables. I would actually like to see what kind of stuff happens with Boston, because I don't know that they really need all of their support players. So I could see Neko or Amgot actually going to another team in season 2. Will it be LAG? It's really hard to say. And then the other avenue that Los Angeles could go down is kind of a continuation of the mixed style roster where they have kind of Western players and Korean players. And if you paid attention to my last video, I think that their support line for LAG is pretty much all but gone. If I was Florida, just to kind of recap, if I were Florida, I'd be definitely hunting down Shaz and Big Goose and signing them to a very lucrative contract. And in that result, LAG is going to need to find some new supports. Who I'm looking at for this team as Joe Meister from Philly Fusion, Adam from XL2, that's basically New York's academy team, and Harry Hook from the Dallas Fuel. I think that they're all going to be very valuable free agents coming into this next season, and signing them all would actually be a really great addition to an already kind of very stacked lineup if we look at how Stage 4 is progressing for them. So that's kind of where I think Los Angeles Gladiators' mindset is coming into the next season. Next up on the list is going to be the Houston Outlaws, and there's not too much to say about them. I think that their addition of Arhan really didn't make much sense. I think that the biggest upside to this could have been the fact that he maybe could have played a kind of in-game leader role, and he kind of could have possibly been somebody to make them a little bit more aggressive because of what he's shown in the past of being very dive centric and very aggressive, I guess would be the word I would use. But it seems like from other podcasts and shows, it seems like he's actually worked quite closely with the players, but I don't know that they're going to integrate him in. I believe he's actually in Los Angeles as of recording this, so I don't think he's actually going to see much play. And it really doesn't make much sense to actually fit him in the roster at this point, because you're probably jeopardizing more than what it's worth. Seeing how, again, he is natively speaking South Korean, and the rest of the team is speaking English, so it's probably not necessarily worth it. And Genji really isn't that big in the meta, and we really have never seen Arhan on anything else but Genji and Tracer, with maybe a little bit of Soldier here and there. But the role I see him kind of filling is probably more of a player coach. If we're kind of to take what the information we have from the team, from like the inside of the team, as gospel, I think that if he actually has a positive impact on the team, then there's really no reason to cut him, and I think he'd actually be great as a kind of a supporting coach underneath Tyrone. I think that would be a great role for him, and I hope to see him actually succeed there. Another roster move, which come as a surprise to no one, is probably the kind of the trim of Houston. I think that Clockwork and Mendo are probably going to depart the team. It's been very difficult for them to actually fit Clockwork in. I actually thought his Tracer was fairly good, but they never really integrated it in when they needed it. And then Mendo hasn't played a match throughout the entire season, and I don't see that ever happening, so I think he's probably all but gone. And to replace him, I would be very interested if they actually made a play for Dante. I think a lot of people were calling that. Looking at Stage 2 and Stage 3, they did definitely need somebody to fill that Tracer role, and looking at the midseason, they never really found anyone, and he fits the kind of mold of the roster. You don't necessarily need to just slot in Koreans all the time. I think Dante was a great kind of flanking DPS player, and he fits in and actually fills a lot of holes that Houston has. So I think Mendo out, Clockwork out, and Dante in would be a fabulous Houston lineup coming into Season 2. Looking at the Philly Fusion next, I definitely think Hotba and Dayfly are probably going to leave for another team, whether that be an expansion team or another roster. Could be London. I could see. Can't really tell because we haven't seen them play that much. I believe that they actually played today, but I have to actually go. Or I believe Hotba played today. But you don't really get a good enough feel for it, or at least I haven't gotten a good enough feel for them just yet, so I don't know exactly how good they have been. Obviously, maybe some of the Philly Fusion members could let me know. But with their departure, I think that they're going to be making a play for some other members that haven't necessarily seen a lot of playtime in other rosters. And first on the docket for Philly, I believe they're actually going to be hunting 2 Soul Dynasty players. I think Philly Fusion is going to make a play for Zephyr to kind of fill the flex tank role if they do actually want somebody that's a little bit more aggressive. And that's not to say that their flex tank right now is not, doing the job. I think that he's been perfectly fine. But I think that if they do want somebody to kind of fill that B team role, I think that Zephyr actually could do that quite well. And he has, experience playing on a foreign team before, and probably has fairly decent English in that sense. So it's not his first rodeo in terms of having a mixed roster. So I think he would have, fit in pretty well. And then probably my second biggest pick up coming into the season overall, I think the second highest free agent on this list is probably Kuki from the Soul Dynasty. His English seems to be quite fluent enough to actually be on podcast and have conversational English with people. And to boot, his main tank role isn't really that bad. I think that Soul has kind of struggled to find and integrate him in, with Miro kind of overshadowing him in some senses, but I think that Kuki actually had quite a bit of potential to kind of gel with some of their teammates. If you look back at some of the articles that I wrote for Winston's Lab, I actually called for him and Bunny to kind of be the replacement for Munchkin and Miro in terms of the very dive centric metas. So I think that Kuki's probably the biggest or the second biggest free agent coming into season 2 for that reason, and Philly will be making a play for him to kind of play, not necessarily second fiddle to Sato, but if you need someone to play that B team role and you need someone to maybe even contend for that starting 6th spot, I think Kuki could really do it for Philly. Now, somebody in the comment section did actually ask if I could talk about London a little bit more, and I don't have a problem with that. And if anybody else in the comment section has any more questions, feel free to let me know, and I will definitely answer them when I can. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter. I probably will answer them a lot quicker that way, so definitely let me know if you have any questions. But London, we did see a departure from them. They kind of expelled a lot of the GC Busan core, and that is a little sad, but c'est la vie. And with that, I think is going to bring a new kind of mindset when it comes to building this team. I think they are going to be looking at less of the experience and the prestige coming into season 2 for players, and they're actually going to be looking at people who are a little bit more team oriented, because it seemed like when they threw 2 of the best kind of pre-Overwatch League teams together, it seemed like they butt heads and they were kind of vying for play time, and it seemed like the coaching staff were trying to fill that need as much as possible and that kind of sacrificed the overall success of the London Spitfire. Yes, they did win stage 1, but overall you saw them just kind of play with their roster too terribly much, or a lot, I should say. They played with the roster quite a bit, and they never seemed to find good enough ground to make a play for playoffs. And if we look at stage 4, their play hasn't been very good. Now they've kind of made the cuts necessarily, and looking forward into season 2, they're going to be making very team oriented pickups. So definitely be on the lookout for that. I think they're definitely going to be looking at a lot of free agents coming in from Contenders Korea. So it's kind of that would be my prediction, is that they're actually going to be looking at Contenders Korea and not necessarily other teams to pick up from. And that opens up the pool very, very wide. So it's kind of difficult to say. But the 2 players that I actually would like to see come in for Nuss, I think that Nuss has been kind of lackluster on his role. A lot of people say that there's good speculation that he's actually the shot caller for the team, but I actually would like to see Bebe and Roki come in from X6 Gaming. They were actually a big reason why X6 won this season. Not to mention that the team was just nuts overall, but I think that their support kind of style fits London pretty well. Not to mention that if you, again, kind of looking back at the last video, I believe that Flower will be overtaking Libero's position as a starting 6 member, and Libero will probably look for a free agency. And I believe that London, knowing Jack, knowing Cloud9's general philosophy, they are going to be looking at team-oriented players now, I believe. But they do kind of strive for excellence, and I think that Libero is probably the best pickup that anybody can get. And if anybody's going to get him, it's probably London, and it's actually going to fill out the Bird Ring Prophet, third DPS slot, which obviously would be Libero. I think that DPS trio is actually very, very scary, and they all actually play off each other very well. It's probably going to be Bird Ring Prophet and then Libero. So Libero is probably going to be on the starting 6, and then they're going to rotate off Bird Ring and Prophet, when maps allow it, because of how flexible Libero is and how kind of he acts as a catalyst to make the other DPS look that much better. And then last but not least, that leaves us with the San Francisco Shock. I do think IDDQD is probably going to be departing the team. He hasn't really done much in terms of play time outside of the preseason, which really doesn't count in my eyes. He has acted as a face for this team. You could look at Baby, you could look at IDDQD. I think IDDQD actually has done quite a bit of media obligations for the team, it seems like. But outside of that, I don't know exactly what kind of impact he has had on the team. So I think that he's probably going to leave, and I don't know that anybody is going to sign him. I wish him the best of luck, and that's no shade to him as a player, because he's very talented, but I just don't see anybody really making a play for him. And if anybody did, it would probably be Florida in kind of a very late season pickup, just to kind of fill out the roster. I think that he actually would be great on the desk. There's only 2 players that I think that could not necessarily fill Johnny's role, reinforce his role on the desk, but because he's kind of pioneered the way for Overwatch Pro players to get on the desk, I think that IDDQD has actually had quite a lot of experience looking at Overwatch World Cup at BlizzCon. He actually has quite a bit of desk experience, and the other player that I actually think would be good at that is Seagull, and I think that was actually my first Reddit comment, was saying like how articulate and smart he was. So, I think that those 2 would make a great desk. And I think that maybe that's a career that he could pursue, and I wish him the best of luck, but I don't think that he's going to be sticking around in Season 2. Next up on the kind of chopping block, unfortunately, is Dak. I think that Dak definitely did not really make a dent in the supportive scene in the Overwatch League and was kind of immediately replaced. But I do think that he provided a very strong role within the team as kind of a vocal leader, and I think that he could be a fantastic general manager or a coach. His man management, I think, is very pivotal for this team, and I would love to see him stay within the San Francisco Shock, but not necessarily in a player role. So I think that he's going to kind of shift roles. Another move that San Francisco probably will make, which I think is kind of set in stone. Obviously, this is just purely speculation, and it just is a prediction, and I have no info on this. But I would love to see them make a play for Avast to kind of fill out the support trio. So you have Sleepy, Avast, kind of allowing that role to kind of flourish a little bit more. And he also has synergy with Super because they played back on LG Evil. Obviously, if you could kind of bring more of those people over, obviously they could make a play for Jake, but I don't think that Houston's going to be letting him up. So the next best, not the next best deal, but the kind of slowly rebuild that old LG Evil core. I think that Avast is really not doing much on Boston, and he probably won't see any play time. So just bring him over to San Francisco, and I think he actually could do pretty well. Will he see play time? Maybe. I think that he definitely has a play style, but he's actually incredibly smart, having talked to him personally. So I think that he could actually do fairly well if, one of the other support players needed to take a break, or, if a map allowed it. I definitely think he could slot right in. And then that leaves us with the last kind of removal. I think that Baby Bay is probably going to depart the team. There's not a lot of play time to be had, and if he does get an offer from what I kind of think is his best option, I definitely think he should take it. His best option being my predicted fuel rebuild focused around Chips Ian, Seagull, and Arrow, Coach Arrow. I think that they should definitely focus around that. I definitely think you should probably keep Uncle on that team, and I think an addition of Baby Bay to help Chips, Seagull, and Arrow on that team would be incredible, because I think Baby Bay has one of the best hit scans in the West, and I think his Soldier, his Widow is actually quite good, especially looking at preseason at stage 1. I think he could definitely have a return to form. And I think he would fill out the DPS roster for this kind of Dallas Fuel rebuild very, very nicely. And he is very vocal, so that is definitely a thing that Dallas needs, is a kind of very structured, very vocal and loud leader, especially when you have people kind of echoing the fact that Chips and some of the other Swedes like Coco don't necessarily talk too much. So I think that he would actually fit within the team really well. But yeah, that's pretty much my predictions. I kind of gloss over Los Angeles Valiant because there's a lot of things there that I think are in flux. When you look at that B team, I think you could basically make like a contenders team out of that, depending on how the contractual layouts progress in season 2, where you could have a very flexible system where you can move Overwatch League players to contenders. I think that if that's the case, which I believe that it probably will be, with a lot of people, very deep in the scene like Monte Cristo actually kind of highlighting that and kind of hoping that actually is pushed forward, and he thinks that that's actually the future of these contracts. I see it happening, and I think that they're basically B teams, so like Finzi, KSF, Verbo, those guys on the bench. I think they probably move down to contenders to kind of really facilitate not only competition for them, but to kind of gel as a team, so that the scrims against the starting 6 are a little bit better, and they have a very clear way to show their mettle against a lot of these other teams. So that's why I kind of gloss over them, because it's not necessarily roster moves for them, I think, in season 2, but I think it's very structural changes for the kind of playing along the landscape. So other than that, that's my predictions for season 2, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.